So this is one of the final sessions of the Grad Futures Forum this week. Welcome, come on in. We're coming to you live from Chancellor Green Rotunda here at Princeton University, and we know that we have a virtual audience as well as an in-person audience here with us today. It is my pleasure to kick off this conversation around business skills within the academy and beyond. How to become a business savvy PhD. We are very fortunate to have a very dedicated alumni community. Many of our graduate alums have gone on to careers beyond the academy and also careers within the academy where they are using business skills. What do we mean about when we refer to business skills? I'm going to let our keynote speaker tell us a little bit more about that. One of our dedicated alums who has been to campus and has helped us really design a business skills learning cohort that will launch in just a few weeks. We will be launching this learning cohort. Essentially, we will meet with graduate students over a series of 10 seminars. There will be readings and case studies, really to illuminate a little bit more about what we mean by business skills and demystify a little bit about what we mean by business skills so that it doesn't seem as though we're only talking about the business sector or the private sector. These skills, as I know our keynote speaker will tell you, are relevant within the academy as well. So we'll go into more detail on what we mean by that. So again, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote, Jim. Sorry, just had a feed here. Jim Scully, who is a PhD from the economics department. Jim is currently the managing director in Accenture Strategy and the lead for Accenture's North America strategy development programs. He has deep expertise in learning and development, and so he and I have had many conversations about how we could build out this cohort, how we can use business case studies and other relevant readings and materials to infuse and spark a dialogue with our graduate students around business skills and ways that they can apply some of those skills immediately throughout their doctoral training. Jim has worked with extensively with clients in developing corporate and business unit strategies and has established commercial and operational initiatives, identifying key competencies, resources, and the criteria necessary to have measurable impact across different sectors. It is my pleasure to introduce Jim Scully, our keynote speaker. Join me in welcoming Jim to the stage.
Thank you. It's very nice and odd to be back in an actual classroom. I was telling Eva, like, it's been 20-ish years since I was physically on campus as a regular. When I was one of the first people to use slides and color and animation, and now I feel like I desperately need my team to help me jazz up my slides. My team who might be watching, I gave them the link, so I'm sure I'll be getting direct feedback at the end of this, in fact, if they were. It was also nice being on campus today because I got the chance just to walk around a little bit and have a quite nice weather outside, and it also got me reflecting that when I was here as a grad student, we did not have cell phones, and we didn't constantly have something in our ear. We certainly didn't have masks on either all the time. But all of those things have changed, and it's a different world. But one of the things that stayed the same is the graduate student community, and we're all here for a purpose. But that purpose might change in what we want our life purpose to be over time. And so where I thought I would start, before getting into kind of my story and introducing myself in great depth, is just that decision that all of us who were coming along and decided that we want to get a PhD. I still remember I went straight undergrad to grad school, so I was at my undergrad dorm and ER was on, for those of you who remember ER, when James Trussell, who was the dean of the public policy school and the head of the Office of Population Research, called me to tell me I got an offer to, or is it an offer when you're an undergrad? Or sorry, when you're a grad student? It's not an offer. It's accepted. I was accepted. Yeah, offers in my world now. Accepted to the graduate program in economics and the Office of Population Research. And going into that, one of the things that I think everyone needs to step back and think about as they're going through that process is why. Like, I'm going to get a PhD. Why? And what do I think I'm going to get from that experience? And now, that some time has gone on, whether it's a PhD, whether it's an MBA, whether any advanced degree, one of the things I always ask people when they come talk to me about, I want to go do something different in education now, why? What do you think you're going to get from this? And that doesn't mean that it has to be what you actually did get from it, right? Because did you make the right decision at that point in your life with the information that you had then? And so all of us had a why. All of us wrote essays to get here. And so there's something that we think we were going to do. I can tell you what I wrote is certainly not what I actually did. Much like for undergrad, if you looked at my undergrad essays, I was going to be a biochemist. Nope, didn't even take a science class while I was at Bates. I went into economics because I thought that was really interesting. So now you're here, right? You're here, you're getting your PhD. Is it what you expected? What are you actually getting out of the experience? And what do you want the experience to be? And so I had the opportunity this morning to listen to the Inclusion Leadership panel, and it got me thinking about, what is your experience here? At the most fundamental, so as I take notice, there's two things I think everybody is doing. We're all doing some sort of research. We're all doing some sort of learning. Most of us are doing some sort of teaching. So if I think about what are the component things that are going on as a grad student, you're developing skills. The early days, your back in classroom is probably not all that different from undergraduate days. It's familiar. You're going to class, you're learning, you're reading, you're talking, you might be writing. You might be sharing each other's computer code to get your homework done. All that good stuff. And the other thing that I think anytime you're in academia, you don't have necessarily the lived experience of what you're reading about and what you're learning, but you have a bunch of stuff being shoved into your head. And that's all awesomeness, right? Because you didn't have to live it. Somebody else lived it for you. Now you're learning from it, and then it allows you to pull from those experiences later. So they're not your personal experiences, but they're experiences and they're tales and stories and relevant facts that you can pull later. So that's what I'm calling kind of in the information group as well. Then you got research. All of us, if you're in a PhD, to get out of here with that PhD, you're going to have to come up with some sort of dissertation. No matter what the rules on that are, can change, but there is some research element somewhere, whether it's lab, whether it's writing, whether it's publishable papers, whether it's an epical tome or a cool story. Something's going to happen there in the research element. For a lot of us, there's teaching. Not everybody has to, but teaching becomes at least for me, it was a critical element of my story and how I developed. There's collaboration, and I'm using collaboration for my broad. I was trying to come up with a word that said you engage with humans. And I'm going to go with collaboration, but it's all of the interactions that you have. It's the interactions that you have with people in your classroom, with colleagues that you meet, with other graduate students, with faculty. It's across the board. You're interacting with humans in lots of different ways. And then there's just the experiences. This is not all about education. You're all growing as human beings as well. I would definitely say my 20s here at Princeton were some of my formative years in terms of, exploring things in life, in culture, learning things about myself. So you're having all of those too, and there's lots of pieces to this puzzle. It may not feel like it to you all now, and again, maybe this is just being an outsider coming in for the day. It feels like a much more relaxed environment. People seem much more chill here. You may not feel that yourself right now, but you have so much more flexibility in terms of time. That can be both a curse and a blessing. We were chatting before. As undergrads, everyone gets really excited about this year that I graduated. As a grad student, 03 is my technical year. I wasn't here in 03. That just happens to be when the little piece of paper came. 95 is my grounding point because that's the cohort of people who I met and who I spent time with. So if I gravitate towards who are my Facebook friends who I still wish happy birthday to, they're 95. Damned if I could tell you who graduated in 03. I don't even know what those people do anymore. So, this is the experience. You're living an experience as a grad student. There's a heavy element of the academic. There's a heavy element to the PhD, but there's also your life, because you're also getting older. You're getting, well, we don't like older. You're getting seasoned. You're getting seasoned a little bit more, and you're having different experiences. You also are very nicely positioned here between Philly and New York. I always went to New York, very rarely to Philly, and now call New York home. So you reach a certain point. You can see that end coming, that date might be coming. You can see there's going to be something after Princeton. And the question then is, what's after? Where do I go from here? And how do I translate the experiences that I've had into what I want to be or where I want to go in the future? For many people, this is a really easy thing, because for many people, when you wrote that application to get here, you thought you were going into academia or an academic adjacent area. So for me, my PhD is in economics. Pretty clear when you write, and again, I'll ground you. This is, I told you when I started, so 95. So this is, 25 plus years ago. Very grounded in, I thought I was going to be a professor. I thought I was going to go do this. I really liked economics as an undergrad. Going to go get my PhD. I'm going to continue on from there. It's going to be awesome. That is not what happened, as you can tell. But for most people, what you think is, I'm an undergraduate. Maybe I worked for a little bit. This is where you're at now, grad student. The natural trajectory and path forward, maybe if you're in the sciences or you're going to go do a fellowship or a postdoc, then you're going to become a professor of some sort. And there's the academic adjacent route. So in my world, those would be like the Fed or the IMF or government related things. But most people and most of what you're being prepared for, most of what the people who you're interacting with on a regular basis, your professors and the like, are thinking is that your pathway is to go to the job market, which is in academia. Okay, cool. You know what? Even in academia, there's some other paths down that road that you probably haven't thought about, which is, how do you become the chair of a department or a dean in the school or those other administrative things, which actually, if you think about it, the skills to get you here have very little to do with the skills that will make you successful here. And along the way, the skills that are valued at different points, very much to get you from here to here, it's probably very heavy on your research elements. Your teaching's important too, because that is going to be a component part. But what are people really looking for? It's going to differ by school. It's going to differ by places that you're going to. But what's valued in the skill set changes over time. And then you end up into this, completely wacky world over here. And you might be interacting with some of these people now. And you realize, oh, they don't know what they're doing. Because no one ever taught me how to do that. No one ever thought back here, if you're one of these people, that means you actually get to hire and fire people too. When did I learn that skill? Or I have to create a budget and manage a budget. Well, I guess if you're here, if you're in the labs or you're doing stuff with grants, that comes up. Certainly didn't come up in my part of the world. So even in the most linear of, this is where I thought I was going, we may not be preparing you for everything that's going to come ahead. That's okay. You're never going to know everything. You're going to learn from people. There's on-the-job training. There's experience. You're growing as an individual. That's good. If we taught you everything you need to know by here and then life was over, it'd be pretty boring. So we don't want that. That's not the idea. But the idea is that you're constantly learning skills, and how you're going to adapt those for going forward is going to differ kind of based on the environments in which you're in. And when you take a left-hand turn and you go somewhere off this page, then you have to question, well, what do I do with what I had, and where do I go next? So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. So I went to Bates College in Lewiston, Maine, very cold place, very wonderful place, great to be there for 4 years. I told you I thought I was going to be a biochemistry major. Got there, they told me the first course I had to take was orgo. That was going to be 8 hours freshman year, labs all the time. I said, thank you very much. I did this thing called Junior Achievement. I thought that was really cool. So I'm going to try this economics gig. And I always like math, so I'm going to go do math and econ and great. And I never looked back from there. So one of my philosophies as an undergrad was, I know I like econ. I want to also explore all the other social sciences, because I thought to be a well-rounded economist or undergrad social science dude, that it would benefit me to take a course in every other one of the social sciences to learn how they think about a problem. So how can I apply that skill set or that frame of reference to a problem? So I took courses in sociology and demography, political science, like across the board, and I really enjoyed demography. I had a professor, the course was demography of women, and had a professor who had gone here to Princeton. She was in the Office of Population Research, introduced me to that part of the world. I also, at Bates, like Princeton, we did undergraduate thesis. So I had the opportunity to do an undergraduate thesis, and through that, got very much into the kind of true academic researchy elements. And the people around me, like, you're really good at this is really exciting for you. You should definitely go look at labor economics, population, Princeton's the place to go, yay, rah, rah. Cool, that's what I did. 21-year-old Jim shows up as a new grad student at Princeton. Now, I would never give anybody that advice now, but with the information I had at the time, it was the right decision to make. And that's my point about making decisions based on what you know. We can all look back and say, oh, I should have done something different. Doesn't matter. You get to where you are based on the experiences that you have, and you make the right decision with the information you had. I absolutely made the right decision at that point. Like I thought I wanted to be a professor. I really liked econ. I was good at math. I had my double degree in that. Princeton was the best place for me. Got here, took the first. So anybody here in the audience, the live audience, the in studio audience, we'll call it. Anyone in the in studio audience in econ? Okay, this isn't going to mean anything to you. Maybe at the at home audience. First thing we had to do when we got here, we had to take this math test thing and find out if you had to go to this special math camp. 24 of us failed it, across the board. Didn't matter what your background is. And so now you're getting the aha, like, oh, this isn't like undergrad anymore. Cool. We do our things, intense classes, very much more theoretical than I was used to. I like the applied economics elements, but year one, cool, this is the grounding, gotta have your grounding, everyone's gotta get your foundational stuff, You go to a cooking class, first thing you learn is how to cut with a knife. You got to get your foundation right. Check. Second year, had the opportunity to start teaching. I was an NSF fellow at the time, so I got, you didn't have to teach at all, or you could teach, unlike people who were on the contractual, on year 3, you must start teaching, this is part of the deal. I knew I wanted to teach. I've always known I wanted to teach as an undergrad. I did some elements of that. So I jumped in, got to teach intro econ, carried on through labor economics, development economics, econometrics, all this good stuff. Like, ooh, this isn't actually improving in terms of this applied element that I'm looking for and craving isn't there. It was actually in year 2 that I had enough bells going off to know this probably is not the right long-term thing for me. But as a good economist, I also know that if I were to leave now, I would send a bad signal to the market. And therefore, I started this, I want to do this, and there's other things I can get out of this experience. And so I did, continue to pursue, obviously. 85 years later, I got that 03 with the star. No, only 8. It's only 8. Got that, and what I did along the way was I made sure that I was shaping the experience for myself to get exposed to different things, to amplify the things I liked, to continue to challenge myself and grow from those things that challenged me, and see what else was out there in the world. So I took 2 internships at the National Institutes of Health. So if I talked, when I talked earlier about the academic adjacencies, this was a totally cool one. These people give Princeton money, therefore, we know how to work with those folks. Got the hookup, became an intern down there at the National Institutes of Child Health and Human Development in their demography group. Got to spend 2 summers in DC. I did two years in a row. and really got to learn about the kind of proposal process and grant funding, the research that they do. Super interesting. Government, super frustrating. Like, I still to this day, one of the best pieces of advice I give it to lots of people now is that I learned in my first week there, they're like, don't ask questions you don't want to hear the answers to. Like, oh, okay. Because as soon as you ask a question, you get the answer, then you got to do something about it. Just go do what you wanted to do. Or, know your bounds, know your risks. Great people, absolutely, but completely frustrating in terms of the pace of change and what happened for my personality and for what I liked. So, okay, government's not going to be for me. Interesting experience, learn more. So, I've knocked some things out again. We're going to keep exploring. Kept teaching, taught for years 2 through 6 while I was physically on campus. Over the summers, I also taught. I taught in the public policy school some of our summer courses for diverse candidates who didn't have the background in economics to help them get ready for college in public policy school. Also, was a fellow at Forbes, helped develop stuff there, helped work on some of the teaching elements here at Princeton when we were developing that. So I found things that were in the network, all of which as a graduate student at that time, I had to go find myself. Nobody was coming to me as a graduate student and say, oh, you want to do something else or you want to explore other elements or develop other skills and have different experiences? Well, let me hand those to you. This was, you have to figure out the ecosystem that's around because the ecosystem at that time at least was built for a very specific purpose. And that, if you wanted to push out of that purpose, you had to take the initiative and you had to do that with deliberateness. Now, what's great, 20-something years later is the graduate school and Princeton as a whole has recognized the value of some of those different things. And there are things like Grad Futures and the like that are there in support from career services to help you explore those. But it's all still things that you have to pull into and pull out of it what you want. So when you do that, I talked about a little bit about what changed. So I learned more about what was going on. I couldn't see myself in the future. I couldn't see myself actually at a place like Bates. But as I said before, Bates was lovely. Lewiston, Maine is great for 4 years of my life. Like I don't see myself back in Lewiston, Maine for I like the place where the teaching and the people elements of it were at least equally, if not more weighted than the research elements. And that was not the experience I was feeling at the time. And again, I'm sure I really enjoyed 4 lectures on the separating hyperplane theorem, and it's made a big difference in my life. It's like, why do I need to know? What's the so what? So then it became what have I learned? What skills do I have? What can I amplify? What do I want to get rid of in this experience? So you step back and you think about it, and I think, regardless of what you're doing in your career, I think self-reflection is really important. And stepping back every once in a while and just kind of assessing where you are and where you want to go. I remember in undergrad, so I'll give you a joke and a serious. Well, they're both true, but in undergrad, I had a professor for philosophy of the mind, and we had to write our self-evaluation about our class participation at the end of the semester, and that was like 33% of our grade or something. And I'll give myself a B+, because honestly, what I said was meaningful and important and valuable, but I didn't talk all the time, like some of my colleagues who just talk for the sake of talking. So I think I have leftover points from last time I was with you in Introduction to Logic. So very logically speaking here, I'm gonna go with a B+ because I'm not a win-back. So I share that because when I got to Princeton, again, you learn from the experiences that you've had, I made my students always do self-evaluations of themselves around their class participation and how they grew over the semester. Because one, that was gonna be part of their grade. So I would rather hear it from you and reflect on it. I was always willing to push somebody's grade up, much like he did with me. And if you were completely not connected to reality and scored yourself way too high versus your actual experience, I would take you down to the floor. Still probably do that today with my teams. Point being that self-reflection, building it in others is an important skill as well. And I would start that early. So I reflected and I said, what have I learned here? Well, clearly, there's 2 kind of no-brainers in my opinion. Research and analysis. We're all doing research and analysis, whether it's quantitative analysis or qualitative analysis. This is a core part of what we all do. Check, got those skills. Problem solving. You're dealing with ambiguity. You're looking at something new that somebody else has not looked at. That's a key skill that I've developed. Written communications. Couldn't get communications spelled out here. Written communications. You have to somehow turn what you did into something that other people can read. Got that. Probably not as much written communications. You don't actually write a lot, but you do talk a lot. So there's verbal communications as well. And this is probably depending on what your department is, but there's a combination of verbal and written communications, and there's a certain style to that written communications in grad school. And it's different between the teaching element probably and the academic or more research element. Then there's time management. I think this is a really, really important one that you learn. And what you might learn is that you don't care about it because you have an unbounded amount of time to do things sometimes, or it becomes very bounded, right? And so a bound here in graduate school is when does your money run out? Like what your grants are or what your fellowships are, but then there's also an unbounded element of it. It's like, okay, well, you do you, and you let me know when this thing's done. I don't think she's here anymore, so I'll tell this story. I had a professor, in my dissertation, we had to write 3 papers of publishable quality. And I had a professor who I was like, oh, here's my paper, can you read it? She's like, I'm going on leave, I'll read it next year. And I'm like, yep, okay. That tells me, that gives me a really good perspective of how we feel about time around here. Check. You have to figure out time management for yourself. I used to love working on Friday nights because nobody expected anything from me on Saturdays. Nobody was in the office, I could get tons done. That's my time management because of what my personal life and such allowed. That would not work now. That wouldn't work if you've got kids or a significant other who actually wanted to see you. But depending on where you are and what time, you figure out how that works together. Chancellor Green for me will always be 2 things, not what any of you think of them today. This is where I used to meet my undergrads to talk about their problem sets because I wanted to be accessible, and I would come here the night before problem sets and be here from like 6 to midnight. It's also where I came and played pinball and air hockey, because this used to be kind of the student hall. So you find what works for you, and you find that balance across things. And so time management, whether you realize it or not, you are figuring out time management here. Teaching, I'm a big one on this one. I think teaching allows you to take something you know a lot about, a complex idea, and break it down for other people. You have to learn how to deal with different folks, and if you're good at it, you learn to adapt. And people development. And whether it's grading stuff, whether it's giving feedback on presentations, whether it's writing edits to something, all of that's elements of people development that's being developed as well. So what's my journey after Princeton? So after Princeton, I actually ended up back at NIH. Where I really was going was Dean & Company, which is a strategy consulting firm, a small one in the DC area. But the economy had taken a turn and our offers got delayed. And so my nice friends at NIH said, hey, you want to come back for 6 months? I'm like, sure. I mean, it wasn't horrible. Now this is where you take the flip, which is like, I know I'm not staying. So 6 months of government work? Okay, I can do that. So it was interesting, different. This time I worked in the National Institute of Aging, and that was cool. My exit out of academia into the non-academic world, my evaluation was, so all those skills I just talked about, got it. Like, I like research. I like problem solving. I like analysis. What I don't like is publish for the sake of publishing. What I don't like is that things can go on forever. What I don't like is it's very isolating. In econ, like if I wasn't teaching, I could have been like locked in the bottom of pick your favorite hall and no one would have known because no one was looking for me because it was all stuff by yourself. And so I looked for where can I take these skills that I have and apply them in a way that amplifies up what I like. And so I looked at consulting, I looked at iBanking, I looked at the academic adjacent things, and I ended up with consulting because we do research, we do analysis, we do problem solving. We do it for people who pay us a lot of money. Why does that matter? It's not the money part itself. It goes back to that limited resource thing. if you pay a lot of money, it means a couple things. It means I actually care about the problem, so I want to do something about it. And so that gets me out of the publishing for the sake of publishing. No one's paying consultants to create reports that are just going to sit on a desk and go forward. The other thing is it time boxes it, because money doesn't last forever, right? So if you're paying a bunch of money, you only have from this point to this point to get the project done. So that I'll get back to you in a year thing, that completely goes away. So I thought this was a good use of my skills and talent, and the company that I chose was a small company. I think when you think about consulting companies, you can think about them on two dimensions. There's specialist versus generalist, and there's small versus large. And for me, I said, okay, well, I just got this PhD. That's about as specialist as I can go. I want to go the other side. I want to go all the way back to generalist, because I don't know what I don't know. Like, I've had this aha in my 20s. Like, I don't want to be super specific. I want the ability to be broad. Second thing, small versus large. I went to Bates, small, 1,600 people. This still feels kind of, like, this felt big to me at a time, but it's still on the small. Like, I wanted small. I felt that was better for my personality, that I could make more of an impact, that I could help grow and leave my imprint, so that we weren't going to be churning out replicas of people, but, you know, taking the best of everyone and creating a collaborative team environment where we're all different. And I like that. So that's how I ended up at Dean & Company. I can tell you now, looking back, the specialist versus generalist thing was not as big of a deal as I would have thought. Because even when you specialize, there's so many other things that you can do in that area. The big versus small definitely played a big role. I was there for about 10 years. So I moved to DC for that. Was there for about 10 years. During that time, I also got to lead our recruiting efforts. Our firm had the idea to take all of the HR functions and break them up and spread them across all of us in management. You can make your own judgment as to whether that's a good or a bad idea. They eventually put them all back together. But I got recruiting, and that was cool, because I like that it's people development part again, bring people along. Got to come here a lot, did a lot of interviewing here over the years. Decided after 10 years I wasn't learning as much anymore. I always said at Dean, if I had 3 projects in a row where I didn't feel like I was learning or growing, then it was probably time to change. And so I felt like it was time to change. And I did the same thing. I said, what do I like, what do I don't like? The opportunity kind of fell in my lap, because Cadman was a former client, and they were looking for someone to come and bring more rigor and analysis behind their decision making. SCORE, rigor, analysis, research, rigor. You want to drive to change. They also want to take the company public. Like, cool, new experience, something new, grow, great. So we got the leverage what you're good at, develop some new things, perfect combo, off to Cadman. Was there for about a year and a half. Kind of figured out they didn't really want rigor analysis behind their decision making, nor were they going to go public anytime soon. Not a fit. Go back to square one and think about what are the things I like, what are the things I don't like, what can I amplify, and I decided I want to go back to consulting, and I found Accenture. Accenture is probably the complete opposite of Dean & Company. Dean & Company was like 100-something people. We are now, so I am now still at Accenture, we're now like 750,000 people. Crazy pants. Absolute crazy world. However, I joined a group, so it was 383 when I joined. I remember that very explicitly. It was 383,000 people. I joined a group called Enterprise Transformation Strategy, which was broad transformations across industries. There were only about 50 of us. So the pitch was, a small group within a big firm. So it sounded a lot like Dean, had elements of that, but also had more resources, more access to clients, things that you could tap into. So that's where I ended up. About a year, well, it was actually only a couple of months after being there. A couple of months after being there, they announced that something called Accenture Strategy, big Accenture Strategy, was going to be created. And by the end of that year, everybody in my group got put in different groups. Some people got asked, some people got told. I got told. I was off to Accenture Strategy Consumer Goods and Services, because I happened to be working for a client at the time who makes chocolate and confectionaries and pet food. And therefore, I was going to be in consumer goods and services. Cool. So I picked Accenture because I wasn't going to have to specialize. And then I was told very quickly after, you're going to specialize, but I specialized in something I liked. I can touch and feel. And when I was at Dean, I led all of our life sciences projects because we were developing that practice when I got promoted to management. Great, learned a lot, but I didn't have the passion for the science. At a certain point, I felt like you had to have the passion for stuff. Like, I was really good at it because a flu vaccine, again, ironic that we're talking about this now, a flu vaccine to me was just a widget you keep cold. Obviously, it serves a purpose, but I could completely take myself away from the science and don't really care about your adjuvants and all this kind of stuff. Other people got totally jazzed about the adjuvants. They're great. At a certain point in my career, I felt like you had to be jazzed about that. I don't know that I get jazzed about candy, but I certainly understand it. Like, it interests me, it flows through. It's like, to this day, I spend my days, if I think about the things that I have, like this week, spent time on, it would be carbonated beverages and liquid refreshment beverages, salty snacks, alcohol to go in those carbonated beverages, or to drink straight if you like, beauty products. I feel like I've got some, of course, soups and small, in meals and things like that. All these things, with the exception of beauty, I'm very center grocery store, it feels like. Beauty, if you're buying your beauty from the center grocery store, you need to upgrade. The time will come. So I'm at Accenture now, and I think about what are the skills that I've developed over this little journey. And I'll tell you, I did all of this today. So this was my quiet time, go hang outside, enjoy the warm, the cold, the breeze, the crazy weather that y'all are experiencing. Y'all, like the 45 minutes in New York, I'm so far away. But your research analysis are absolutely still at the core. Like, they're fundamental to everything that we do. And I think any of us who have liberal arts educations or, they started this with us, as toddlers. So that doesn't go away. And I didn't blow it out, but what am I researching or what kind of analysis? Yeah, obviously that's changing. But the fundamental thing that you get as a PhD that I don't think a lot of our, they're not colleagues yet because you're not working with them, a lot of the other humans that you spend time with don't have is this super critical thinking skill. Like, PhDs are able to dissect something and understand it with great specificity. If anything, it's to a fault, because doing your dissertation, you become expert in one specific thing. And what you may need to do is broaden that horizon to be able to see the other things, so you can end up with blinders on a little bit. You get out of those blinders with problem solving. So if I spent most of my time getting my PhD of doing analytic problem solving, I spend a lot of my time now doing business problem solving, which doesn't mean I'm not doing the analytic components as well. But thinking about the so what. Always thinking about so what, or who cares, or why. I have when I talk to new analysts, I talk about, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. Like, is something interesting, or is it actionable? Like, so what's the fundamentals? How am I trying to drive or change somebody's behavior? Comms just continues to blow out. I think this is the most important skill. And this is where, as a PhD, all of the time that I spent teaching and taking concepts and breaking them down, or all the time I had to go explain to somebody what I was doing in my dissertation, like this thing that I spent all of my time on, if I have to go home for Thanksgiving dinner and explain to you what I do, how do I turn that into English? Like, how do I make it so that my mom or dad can understand what it is I do? Now, granted, in consulting, they're not doing great at that one either. So, but how do you take the concepts of what you're doing and break it down so it's approachable to somebody else? And so, in the business world, you change the styles based on the audience in which you're talking to. So I talked before about when you write your dissertation, you are writing it for a very specific target audience in a very specific style. And I remember I advised JPs in my last 2 years, and I made edits on my JPs and gave them to my students. And every once in a while they'd push back. I'd be like, well, you can choose what to do. Feedback's a gift. Like, you could choose what to do with it, but you know who's grading this at the end, right? So you make the choice. I remember having that same feeling about my dissertation advisor. She made edits, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, have you read the grammar books? Like, this doesn't make any sense. but you have to adapt to style. And in the business world, it's exactly the same. And it's finding that balance, and you're trying to persuade people more so, and you have to change. It's not always your style that's going to work. And maybe your style works. So I have a counselee who I tell her, like, his style works with 90% of people. Like 90% of the time, kicking ass. There's that 10% that doesn't work. And so you have to figure out how to close that. And that's part of where teaming comes in, because maybe it's not you who has to close that as well. So style adaptation, and then influence becomes a big part of it. And part of this is also just like checking your ego at the door, which is just because it's your idea doesn't mean that you need to get credit for it. You actually need to focus on the outcome. So a lot of we used to joke, like, we might do a project in consulting, and then you actually read about it in the New York Times 6 months later. You're like, oh, I was part of that, but you can never really tell anyone. And so you have to be comfortable with you're working more through influence than direct kind of command and control. The time management, I think, goes to a bigger part. And I think those of you who are in the life sciences are already obviously doing this in labs and research and like. But it goes the bigger envelope of this one is project management. And it's how do you do multiple things, pull it together. And then when you're trying to get someone that so what and do something, change management is a huge, huge component of that. And thinking through adoption and getting someone to do it so it doesn't just become a recommendation that sits on a piece of paper. I do a lot of work in operating model. Operating model is kind of how a company is set up in terms of the people, the processes, the governance, culture, metrics, incentives, and the like. It's very easy to write on a piece of paper what I want something to be. It's very hard to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And so that's the challenge, and that's around change management. And then the other, we all have our personal lives. It's tax time coming up. If you haven't remembered that, April something or another, I think maybe 18th this year. Budgeting and financial management, huge, huge, huge. Because you do have limited resources, and it's how do you use those resources, including people resources. And this is when I talked early on about you somehow became the chair of your department. Nobody taught you that one. So you're gonna have to figure that one out sooner or later. One that we don't really, or like I can't reflect on having this when I was getting my PhD. This one is new, which is around like client relationship development. And so it's the person with the problem, the person who's paying you. Maybe in some areas you'll have this, and then the issue resolution associated with that, and then sales and origination. So it's it's almost the PhD equivalency of this one, maybe actually figuring out your dissertation topic. Sales and origination is about you have a problem, I know you have a problem, you may not know you have a problem, and how do I pull that out of you, and how do I articulate that so that there actually is a project that we do? It's kind of like setting the stage for what's going to come. And then people development is absolutely positively critical. And in that one, you also have issue resolution. I don't want to say I spend a lot of my time on people issue resolution, but it is a very important part of my job. And then talent management. Like, how do you reward people? How do you grow people? How do you figure all that out? And that's, again, nothing anyone's teaching you along the way, but it's something that you become attuned to. The equivalent here might be, maybe that's grading. It's the first inclination of I'm thinking about somebody and how I evaluate them. I also thought about, so Evan and I have been talking a lot about the skills that you need and the transferable skills. When I listened to the inclusion leadership talk this morning, I also thought about what are the mindsets and behaviors you need? And ultimately, a lot of that boils down to what is your leadership style and how do you create your leadership style? And so I'm going to share some of mine. These are in my leadership style. And I think the important thing is that you develop your own. And developing your own doesn't mean copying somebody else's. You take the good things from the folks that you see as good leaders. You also acknowledge the things that are bad or that you don't want to be. I think my leadership style has actually been influenced far more by the challenging experiences I've had or the bad leaders I've worked with than the good ones. Working with good people is really easy. Working with challenging people is what feels very uncomfortable at the time, but makes you a much better professional over time. So I would start with, in number one, inclusion in all that we do. There's a lot of talk about diversity. I believe that diversity, this is Jim's opinion only, there's so many different kinds of diversity. There's the diversity that we can see, there's the diversity we can measure, but there's so much diversity. I'm focusing on inclusion and bringing in to be a truly inclusive leader and making sure that all of that diversity is celebrated and brought together, because that's how we're going to be better together as a team. Giving people rope to grow. So I think there's two, in the extremes, there's two broad types of leadership when you're managing people. It can be, I give you very little rope and you earn every piece of rope and you go out this way. Or I give you a lot of rope, never enough to choke you, but then I adapt the rope based on what I learned. They're very different outcomes. Much like, I'll put it into the academic world. There's two ways to grade a paper or grade an exam. This is gonna be on the 0 to 100. I can start at 100 points, and as a grader, I have to justify every point I take away from you. Or I can start at 0 points, and you have to earn every point I give you. Conceptually, you would think those would end up in the same place. They do not remotely end up in the same place. For fun, you can go try that the next time you have to grade papers. I was always you got nothing, you have to earn everything. But I'm on the rope, I give you a lot. And we're right, because I'm not gonna put blinders on and say, well, first you have to learn how to do primary research, and then you have to learn to do secondary research, and that's too linear. Because I think you have to set, if you're gonna take the rope philosophy that I take, again, that doesn't mean it has to be your style. If you take that philosophy I take, then you have to set and maintain high expectations. And I've always set and had high expectations, both of my teams and of my students back at Princeton, and of myself. It's also very important to consider other people's perspectives and other people's ways of working. And just because how I do things is one way, doesn't mean that's how everybody has to do it. My way is not necessarily the best way. If I made you always do things my way, I would never see, so if my way is a 10, I have to let you do the 8s and the 9s. I'll coach you for the 7s and the 6s. We'll intervene at the 5s and below. But if I don't do that, one, I don't get leverage, and two, I never see the 11s and the 12s, which are these amazing things I never would have thought about myself, or thought of myself. And that's why we're better together as a team. Continuous learning. Both for myself and my teams, we're always learning. And this is one where y'all got this mastered now. So this one's just don't lose that skill as you go forward. And then be a player coach. What does that mean? A player coach is someone who is both an active contributor to the success of the team and is coaching and orchestrating the team as a whole. You can also think about it, like the first violin in an orchestra. That person has multiple roles in which they play. They're coaching the entire orchestra, they're setting the tone for the orchestra, but they're also an integral part of the orchestra. And I think that's an important part of my leadership style as well. So just to make sure that I wasn't insane, I did take this and sent it to my team earlier today. I said, this is what I'm going to show. Tell me if I've hit the mark. They agreed. So I'm also self-aware, so that's a good one. Being self-aware is a good one too, and that's the self-reflection part of the whole thing. But one thing I encourage you, regardless of where you're going forward, is to figure out what is your leadership style. Because academics too, it's still a job. Like at the end of the day, and we'll often have this, so one of the things I do at Accenture is I lead the development program, so it's all the folks who come right off of campus. And they're like, well, this is what I expected, this is what I want, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, are we talking about, do they have issues with Accenture or what they're doing, or do they have issues that they now have a JOB? Like, which of the two are we talking about? Because academic, you're still gonna have a boss, it's still a job, and there's gonna be pluses and minuses to all of it. And therefore, you have to reflect on kind of the leadership side and the skills that you're bringing and the skills that you want to develop. Part of it also becomes what's your personal brand. And I think this is part of the translation, and this will be different at different points in your life. So when I talked earlier about making a transition, thinking about the skills that you have and the skills that you want to amplify and what you want to grow. There also becomes the what are you known for? And so what do you want people to know about you? And so for me, and I hope that you've gotten this so far today through our chat, I'd say the foundation for me is all around the people development and the coaching and mentoring. Like if you rewind to when I was here at Princeton, I don't think anyone was talking about the amazing research I did. I think people were talking about what outstanding teacher I was and what I did with the Forbes Fellows Program and the like. Like, that's what I was known for here at Princeton. Yeah, I also happened to be in the Office of Popular Research and Economics, and all those are true. But that was, that was the foundation, and it has always been my foundation. This has not changed over time. The middle, the other part of the house, that's evolved, and those are skills that I've developed and strengthened over time. And so, what am I known for? So I'm going to say within Accenture right now, I drive successful transformation programs. So those are things that are complex, that involve an element of change, an element of adoption to them. It takes complex ideas and you have to simplify them using lots of people across lots of different skill sets. 2, effective listening and communications. I think, I said before, communication is really important. Listening is the advanced form of communication. And it's listening both with your ears and with your eyes. And being able to take that information and then do something about it and adapt. And the last one, business operatorship and practice leader. So, I lead this group of analysts. I lead folks in our consumer goods and services practice. Also, in different elements of practice leadership. And I think that's something I'm known for and can do well. So somewhere along the way, I did figure out this budgeting thing and how to actually stick to money and whatnot. And the house, so I put this one at the top of the house because this one could blow away. I was thinking about, I don't remember who told me yesterday. Oh, it was my client account lead. So one of my many bosses. We were on a call together, and he's like, "Did you hear that?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He went out. He's like, "The wind is so bad. My neighbor has it putting in a new roof, and the roof blew away down the street." I'm like, "Oh, okay." But that's how I thought about this one, which is, if the roof were to blow away, so I do this now in consumer goods and services. That is where I spend my time. But if that roof were to blow away, I could put another roof on that pretty easily. I could do that roof in retail or travel. Not sure I want to be in travel right now, but yeah, travel. Yeah. Could be fun. It's a new opportunity. There's lots of problems. So I can build my house in different ways. But this is the always. This is what we built the foundation over time. And then I use the roof to be like, how am I applying it? Why don't I skip this? I'm going to tell you a little bit about kind of some of the different things I did, but I will save this for another time so that we can, I'll give you my last couple thoughts and slides and then open up for any questions you may have. I've used this slide before in presentations when I've come back to Princeton about, like, do I use my PhD? Because usually I come back to talk about consulting, and part of it's in terms of trying to get people to come to consulting. And the slide's around what makes a good consultant, but when we put the things up, it's actually what makes a good professional. And that's why I kind of liked it, because I was like, do I need to change anything? I don't actually need to change anything, because it doesn't matter what you do. In any job, I think these are critical success factors for you. So first is a curiosity and a willingness to learn. There's always going to be something new. The world is always changing. No matter what your job is, it's staying on top of it, ahead of that. Second, the ability to be both a team player and an individual contributor. And you'll grow into different elements over time. But I think this is one of the challenges in PhD land, which is you may be focused on that individual element, and blossoming back to the team is one of the real struggles. A willingness to challenge a team in the status quo. Again, this is an area where if you're working in a lab, you're probably doing this because it's that team environment. But if you're on a team, one of the things the MBAs do really well is they spend 2 years basically working in teams and working around, they're thinking about cases, and they explore the pluses, the minuses. There's a lot of talk. Now, that can be a plus and minus too. But with PhDs, you have to kind of embrace the talk and push it out there. You have so much in your head, you want to put it out there. You also, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to have a different perspective. And I don't think that's something we necessarily teach as much because think about the teaching element. We're teaching you facts, and then you're going to give us opinions, and then we're going to grade you. So we're going to tell you, well, your perspective on this was a B. So, but this is more aligned to my perspective and where I think the right thought process is. That's an A. In a team setting, none of that matters because your grade is a collective grade. You're collectively coming up with the right answer, and you're working collaboratively to do that. Which means One of the great things about coming in kind of fresh is you're not weighted down by the past. So you can really change that status quo. I learned some of the best things I learned are from like our interns and our new joiners because they're coming in fresh and they haven't looked at a problem before. And so know that the ability to look at something fresh is of huge value, but you got to make sure that your voice is heard. Strong business and problem-solving instincts. That to me, the translation for everywhere is the so what. What's the so what? And then strong communications, written and verbal and listening, as I talked about before. At the end of the day, you could do the best research, analysis, and problem solving in the world, but if you cannot effectively communicate it, it is of no value. None of you are leaving here with a PhD unless you figure out a way to take what's here and break it and spill it and get it onto the paper. Similarly, they don't let you just do it on the paper. They do force you to do this little talk at the end. So you gotta be able to talk about it too. That's huge when you leave here. All right, closing advice. Embrace the now while contemplating the future. I gave you a whole bunch of things to think about today. But one of the things I want to leave you with, and hopefully my little reflection to days past, like enjoy the experience that you're having right now. You're only going to get to have this experience once. Even if you know you want to go do something else later, embrace what you're doing now and fully get as much out of it as you can. This dedicated time away to learn that you have is a precious, precious commodity experience that you'll have. You've invested to now, make it pay off for you. If you're contemplating a change, think about that transferable skills and how to articulate it. The thing that we're always looking for when I look at a resume or I'm talking to somebody is how do you take what you've done and apply it to my world? You want people to see you as being successful in whatever environment that you're going to go into. If you're seeking a job, and at first I made this about consulting, but this is about anything. I think this is on the job market for academia as well. The resume screen is the hardest part because you have no control over it's just what's on that piece of paper. So spend time to make sure you get what's on that piece of paper right, and that you're articulating the skills and the transferable skills and making sure what you want to come across, what your brand is coming across on that paper. Once you get into the interview part, not to say that you're all going to sail through, but you have far more control over that. And it's a dialogue. It's a two-way thing. It's a one-way thing on the resume screen. And the amount of time that I'm going to spend on a resume, probably 60 seconds. Be a good listener and conversationalist. I do think this is a challenge, particularly if you're spending a lot of time by yourself, or a lot of time doing what I'm doing right now, right? I'm talking at you. Now I'm looking at reaction, so I'm gauging the room and such, but there's not very much two-way here. Interviews are two-way. So you have to be able to have those conversations and practice, and it feels really awkward for all of us, I think, as adults to do that, but it is a necessary evil here. And I would encourage that as well for the academic market as well. I can't remember the restaurant, but I remember going to a dinner as part of kind of getting to know a company. And I asked beforehand, I'm like, is this dinner going to be evaluative? Like, no, it's not evaluative, blah, blah. Great. Went to dinner, had a lovely time. Went through first round was great. I asked, is there any feedback for me as I go to the second round of interviews? Like, interview is great. The one piece of feedback we have is based on the dinner. They said you really came across as a PhD. So now I've got all sorts of flags going off in my head. I'm like, well, one, you told me it wasn't evaluative. Okay, naive, got that. I'm over that one. I'm naive. I came across a PhD, well, no shit, I am a PhD, come on. So part of that is also getting to know, and I can say that in retrospect and reflecting, the point of it, why I share it today, is everything's evaluative. If you're in an interview process, even if I tell you it's not evaluative, it's still evaluative. There are elements because you're always making an impression. So you gotta be aware of that impression. And then I'll share with you the best question I use with PhDs when I interview them, and I've used this for over 20 years now, is equally I will use this with undergrads from Princeton because of the thesis, but it's to describe your dissertation in 60 seconds. And it gets at that idea of how do you take something that is very complex, that you have been uberly focused on, that you could probably talk about for years, and distill it down so I both understand it and I care about it. I'm gonna leave you with this picture. So this is a blank canvas, and you have the opportunity over your career to put paint on this canvas. And that's based on the experiences, the skills, everything that you have that you bring to the table, and you're gonna color it in different ways. And you can color all of it the same color, you can color it in different colors, you can focus on one part of it. With every new job and such that you have, what happens is you get a new frame. And whether that new job is a promotion, or if that new job is something completely different, that there's more canvas under here. And you're constantly drawing and adding to that. And you're taking it with you. Stuff fades over time, but it's always there. And so, what's happening with you today and the experiences that you're having today and the skills that you're developing today transfer all the way going forward. And you may go into a completely different world. And in that different world, that gives you all new colors of paint. And maybe you're gonna leave some colors of paint or types of paints here at Princeton. They might be orange and black, for instance. You might leave them here at Princeton, and you go to something else. And I leave you that to think about. It really is about the transferable skills and the experiences and the building. It's an ongoing process. And so with that, Ava and I were going to share with you a little bit about what's going to come next. We have been working together, and Amy before that, on kind of what's the so what for business skills or professional skills, or call it what you want, for people who are getting their PhD now. And is it all about going and doing something other than academia? The answer is absolutely not. Because I think, as I highlighted today, all these skills that we talked about are very valuable in the academic world as well, and the progression of the academic world. It's just the weights become different, and the relative evaluations and how you use them and mix them up become different. So we've been working with, we've been talking to a couple of different business schools, and we've been talking more so, we're dating heavily now with one, and are working on a curriculum to put together to be able to pilot a 10-session series to kind of go deeper into business skills that are transferable both for academia and outside of academia. You want to share anything more, or have I hit it?